I know many of you have seen the videos online of perpetual motion machines, and the gag is always, the hardest thing about building a perpetual motion machine is trying to figure out where to hide the batteries. But I've seen tons of weird videos of UFOs. I've seen videos of what appears to be anti-gravity devices. And these things have circulated for a long time. Talk of water-powered cars. And the conspiracy theory is always that the powers that be are restricting this technology from us for a variety of reasons. Maybe it's because it would be too much too soon for human beings, could disrupt the economy, cause the collapse of the global order. Maybe. Or maybe it's all just hoax videos online. Who knows? But there are a lot of questions. And so we've brought a handful of gentlemen to not only discuss these issues, but actually give some demonstrations. So we'll start with Dr. Wei-Ping Yu. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, my name is Wei-Ping Yu. I'm a physicist. I currently working at NASA as a cruise spacecraft subsystem manager.
So you actually work at NASA?
Yes.
So that's it? That proves everything you say is correct.
There's a different way they say that NASA means, right?
Yeah.
Okay. My passion is in physics. So I developed called the U-on theory of everything that try to explain every natural phenomenon with one particle, one force, one field, and one principle within one universe.
Okay, interesting. And you've got some demonstrations. You were actually already doing it earlier with this crazy thing, making metal move, and it'll be fun. We've got Ashton Forbes hanging out.
Hey, thanks for having me on here, Tim. This is awesome. I'm so happy to be here with Tim, Ian, and Dr. Yu from NASA. If people don't know me, I'm the guy who's been investigating MH370, the missing plane, the videos that show the orb spinning around the plane, teleporting the plane to another location. And so today, the reason why I came here is I wanted to have Dr. Yu come on from NASA and help explain to people the science around the concept of zero-point energy, why it's significant, and what it means for our future in terms of our technological advancement.
Yeah, I'm Ian Crossland. Hey, everyone. And you mentioned zero-point energy. People look at the sun. They say perpetual energy can't exist, but then you see the sun is always there producing heat, and it's just happening slowly. So over the human lifespan, it seems perpetual, but in reality, nothing is forever. Let's just get to it.
Do it.
Indeed. So, where do we begin?
Yeah, can we start with just like maybe pulling up the videos? I think if you pull up my Twitter account here, guys, and people can follow along at home if they want as well. I just want to give a quick update since the last time I was on with on this podcast, actually, I think it was January 5th, 2024. And there's been a lot of updates with respect to these videos and the investigation. So if you just kind of scroll down to the first pinned tweet here and show this video, one of the biggest revelations that was found is that the video on the right that is kind of you can see the plane being shot in close in the circle there is actually something called wide area motion imagery, WAMI, and it's specifically Gorgon Stare Increment 2, which is produced by the U.S. Air Force. This is actually...
So we got to hold on. Very, very, very jargony. What is Gorgon Stare? What is this?
Well, Gorgon Stare is a brand, but Gorgon Stare is basically, there is a drone. There's actually two drones here, two different videos. One drone is horizontal to the plane, and we're seeing that in a color FLIR, which is why you see this color. It's actually nighttime that you're seeing there. The white video that you see on the right is a drone that's above the plane, actually loitering around. They're both MQ-9 Reaper drones. And these drones, they can go in like a hexagonal pattern above an area, and they're taking photos all the time, like 300 photos several times per second. That data beams through relay satellites to ground-based computers, and then it actually produces Google Earth video playback. And it's a real-time plus rewind capabilities. So somebody logs into the system, they see a big, huge field of view. They press somewhere on the screen, that will open up a window. That's the window we're seeing in this. They can move the window around and track the object they want to track. And then at the end of the video, now in this particular version, you don't see it, there's a mouse cursor that comes on the screen and they close the window at the end. I just wanted to show people this version because you can see how both videos are perfectly in sync. You can even watch how the orbs are perfectly aligned in both videos as well. And so this is huge because previously I was looking, how do you prove these videos are real? I had found the leaker of the videos, a guy named Edward C. Lin. He legally changed his name around the same time I was on your podcast, actually. after I started naming him as the guy that leaked these videos, because nobody knows he's the guy that leaked the videos. And I realized that I don't need him after I found the Gorgon Stare revelation. The reason being, since that's Gorgon Stare Increment 2, that was only announced a couple months after the plane disappeared, which means that Gorgon Stare has been in use for 10 years. The number of Air Force personnel who've seen Gorgon Stare, or intel people who've seen it, has to be thousands. That means thousands of people know that that is legitimate wide area motion imagery footage, and they're just not saying anything about it. So at this point, anybody who thinks the videos are fake, all you have to do is go to anybody in the Air Force who's seen Gorgon Stare and say, is that Air Force Gorgon Stare wide area motion imagery? So that's the big revelation. And just from the science perspective, I love that you're clicking and pausing it here, because I wanted Dr. Hugh to see this, is that these dark lines that are in front of the orbs, I've actually been able to figure out what's going on with these orbs. These orbs are actually a hypersonic U.S. Air Force design. Now, I don't know if Boeing or Lockheed Martin's the defense contractor. It's probably one of the two of them. But what they are is they're a miniature particle accelerator. They're in hypersonic design that's based on the scramjet designs. And it's basically just a tube that's a drone. And this tube sucks air in through the front. And they use super powerful superconducting magnets along the tube. And it turns it into a particle accelerator that can compress the air or compress the plasma to cause fusion to occur. And so what this allows is they can have a mechanism where they can expel propellant behind them and have an intercept mode. And then when they lock into their object, they have a forward-facing laser that they can engage. And this acts as like a forward-facing tractor beam, a light sail without an actual sail. They can pull it forward. And then all they have to do is do the calculations to figure out how fast the orb is moving and have the expellant or the laser in front match that speed. And now you've created constant momentum. You're basically sailing through the sky at the maximum efficiency possible for something that, a rocket or any type of propelled device. The last thing about them is that these powerful magnets also, we can see if you watch the heat signatures of those orbs, there's a very clear green part in the orbs. When the orbs first appear next to the plane, it's all green. It's because there's different modes. If they have the green mode on, those are the electrons. And what do electrons do? They repel. So if I'm flying through the sky and my electrons are in the way, it acts like a wall slowing me down. So they can use those to control how fast they move. And then the electrons begin to move, like this green shape begins to shift and move around. That's because the combined magnetic field around the plane is causing the electrons within the actual orbs to shift around. They might even be able to move it on demand through the fluid motion of the plasma to cause lift through Lorentz forces as well.
In one of these frames, it looks like the sphere somehow overlaps the wrong side of the plane.
Oh, this has actually been like stabilized or something. So the reason this isn't the original version you're seeing here. So in the original version, there's no like cutting through or what have you. In fact, in the original version, you can even see the orbs cut through the smoke of the back of the plane. Because that's smoke coming out of the plane in this video. The whole thing was a CIA operation. For the people that want to know.
Well, why though?
Yeah, so the why is that, and this is the high level overview. You can find all the evidence and details on my Twitter and on my YouTube streams, but this was a CIA operation against China by the United States. China would have been taking the 20 Freescale semiconductor engineers. They would have been trying to force them to defect, get the technology from them essentially. So what we've got going on here is that China, United States, probably Russia, we're all trying to figure out this technology. China's trying to steal it from us. And we conducted this elaborate counter-espionage operation, which includes a fire on the plane in the cargo bay. We can see the heat signature right there a second ago. And why they did this orb thing to the plane, they basically forced the plane to turn around. They get it away from China into the Nicobar Islands. We have coordinates. We know exactly where this is happening. And then they deploy these orbs right before the plane is actually about to crash into the water. This plane's flying very low. Those are low altitude clouds.
And you're saying they teleported the entire plane somewhere else?
The plane. They teleported that plane. That is not an annihilation we're seeing happen to the plane. We have to have conservation in physics all the time. So if something disappears from over here, it's got to reappear somewhere else over here. It's actually a closed loop teleportation protocol, meaning that there's a point A and a point B. Like, in some of the sci-fi movies, like if they have like a warp gate and you have to go through that warp gate, That's what they're actually
But
doing.
so in your view, this version of teleportation is actually moving it in a higher dimension or moving it through space-time?
And that's what we're going to talk about here today is how is this all actually possible? And how is it possible, like what we just saw there, that a plane can just vanish and almost look like it doesn't even displace the background? And the answer to this is gravity wave.
What's the when this happens, there's this big burst.
Yep.
Now, there have been people claiming that this is just a stock graphic that can be used by anybody with video editing software, and they claim to have found the source of it in a video game and then compared it to an old 90s DOS video game.
Yeah, I remember that. The shockwave debunk. Yeah, it doesn't match at all. It really doesn't. I mean, just go ahead and do a pixel comparison or do a shape comparison. It's similar, obviously. I think that somebody just did a reverse image search, and they found an effect. The problem is you look at that effect up, it doesn't even have the same number of frames. The stock effect has like 7 frames. There's only 4 frames in our thing. None of the frames actually match at all. They're like, oh, well, they just did some compositing to flip it around or what have you. Well, okay, let me make it simple. Who's the guy that did it, right? I've got billions of impressions. These videos are famous. They're making me money because I'm putting them on my YouTube channel. Nobody's copyright.
And the person who would have been alleged to have fabricated could simply just come forward and...
Anytime they want. And we had a $150,000 bounty for a while going on. Guys, there is no hoaxer of the videos. I get it. And this is what people do is that they don't want to believe something's real. So they come up with like, oh, this looks like this. Therefore, it must be this or that.
You know the funniest thing about it is I keep seeing these stories where they're like, this has already been debunked. And then they reference some YouTube crew. Yeah. And I'm like, in journalism, the fact that an expert says I disagree with it is not called a debunking. It's called a counter opinion.
Exactly.
So if they said, I looked at it and my expert opinion is that it's CGI, I need only then one person who's a CGI expert to say no, and now it's a moot point. That's why it's not debunking anything. Yep. And that's why it's typically hard to debunk things. I'm not trying to make it seem like you can, it's impossible. It's an easy thing to do. It could just be very difficult if it is, to prove to people who want to believe it.
I think that the scientific method, one issue I have with the scientific method is that they tend to say just because you can't reproduce something, that means it's not real. Just because we can't detect it, that means it's not real. They're attempting to debunk potential with the phenomenon that they're unable to replicate the potential. So I agree.
And that's what you're right, actually. And that's how is this possible? The answer is 0 point energy. And you say, okay, the first question is, if there is this big answer that allows teleportation, free energy to be possible, why haven't academics figured it out? What's going on? What's the big holdup? Like, it should be this giant thing. There should be a bunch of evidence that supports it. And there is. There's a bunch of experimental evidence that supports we are in a medium. And that medium of space-time is made up of 0 point energy. And then the question is, well, how much energy actually is there in this 0 point energy field?
Well, so real quick, we got a NASA scientist here. Is what he's saying? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, lots of things. We can theoretically explain that phenomena. So you mentioned about the first thing you said that use laser created the orb, power the orb, and you have a black trace in the back. Is that what you said the first time?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then after you mean the orb locked in with the object, the laser is no longer, that black trace is already gone. Is that right?
It's a little bit more but yeah, so they use at first to engage the plane, they are expelling propellant from behind them.
That's right.
And then after they've locked in, it looks like it switches from no propellant behind anymore and just laser in front, pulling it forward like a tractor beam, yeah.
So seems like Ashton already had the answer. So that's the laser focus, the laser beam, the trace of a laser beam. So initially they try to power your laser beam, power these orbs. But once they lock in, it's a second mechanism, right?
Yep, second mechanism.
When they lock it in, the internal carry the beam and start to trace, just like a magnetic called coherent locked in there. And then actually they can trace that one and actually interact, can attract to them, follow the object. So you have an answer, yeah.
Yeah, so, and then how are they locked in like that in a triangle formation? Look up magnet inversion. If people look at magnet inversion up, you say, okay, I have one positive magnet, I'm surrounded by negative, and then I put those next to each other, what happens is you get to a point where they attract, but then they lock in and they won't repel or attract, and they get locked into a perfect orientation. That's what we see with the orbs. Why are they in a perfect triangle formation?
Well, look at this. We've got a UFO floating right there in the middle.
Oh
of the room.
yes,
So
the motion. When you orbiting some things, you lock it in because the orbital motion generates called the centrifugal force, right? Counterbalance, that's attraction force.
and something that starts in motion will stay in motion, right? So it's keeps spinning. Yeah, go ahead.
There was a story recently about a U.S. Air Force pilot who encountered one of the Tic Tac UFOs, and he said that it flew up to his plane and then locked in place. And when he would bank left, it would stay perfectly locked with the plane. Was that guy just lying, or is it that these things actually exist? What I find fascinating about this claim and this story is, regardless of the veracity of the video itself, the idea that there could be orbs flying around is, this could just be another UFO video. They've released tons of them showing phenomena very much like what these orbs are doing. Not in the same way, of course, spinning around the plane and then the plane disappears. Yeah. But we've got tons of stories of the Tic Tacs locking in place, flying alongside U.S. aircraft. There was just a story the other day where a former U.S. Air Force pilot said that he encountered a UFO. It was flying alongside him. He looked to his left and it was just there, flying with him. We've got, dozens of stories like this? So is it really hard to believe that something like this could exist?
No, it's definitely real. And, there is something to this UFO phenomenon. To me, the bigger question just is, what is it? And I've seen you interview a lot of these people in the UFO, connected to the UFO community, or even congressmen. I think I was watching, I think it was Eric
Burleson, yeah.
Yeah, and I think you had Tony Merkel on as well. It was a good conversation, but, respectfully, I think none of the congressmen have any idea of what's going on with this. They've been kept in the dark for the most part. There's a possibility that some of them know, but we have figured out this technology, whether or not it comes from aliens or ancient civilizations, or we're just using that as a
Or just
cover-up.
people.
Yeah, or just people, right? Just people doing stuff. Like the stuff we're seeing in these videos, aliens aren't going around zapping airplanes. That's human stuff. That's human behavior that we see. And so, sadly, I think a lot of people, it's just too far beyond the paradigm for people to think that we have stuff like teleportation technology or that free energy could actually be real, when we've been kind of brainwashed to think that, oh no, it violates the first and second laws of thermodynamics. And so I think that's the big struggle for people to kind of wrap their brains around this. Because the craziest part for me was that I would thought the UFO people have been like, oh, Ashton's found these videos. This is crazy. This proves that aliens can get here, because otherwise there's no way they can get to us. It's too far away, right? But instead, no, they were like the most hostile about all of it. Almost like, I was like taking away their favorite toy or something related to this.
This is one of the weirdest things. And I mean this with all due respect, but the issue of MH370 is not the top of the news cycle nor the political cycle. I got to be honest, it's a story that exists, but the amount of hate, the amount of individuals who have dedicated all of their time to harassing you and trying to discredit you is weird. It's very weird. Like the fake book thing that was happening, I'm like, okay, hold on. I don't get that level of hate. I get death threats. I'm like, this is weird.
It's possible that it is government agents or power structures that are afraid that if free energy gets dispersed to the human race, that we'll destroy ourselves by dropping it on the ground.
Well, let's clarify. Efficient energy.
Yeah. Efficient. It's not actually free. They say the thing about free energy and what they'll say, it can't exist because you can't get more energy out of a system than you put into it. That's the second law of thermodynamics. Well, the truth is there are no closed systems in the universe. Energy permeates reality. So you might see an expulsion here, but that it's coming from somewhere. Just because you don't see where it's coming from doesn't mean it's not coming from somewhere.
Yeah. So when you say free energy, instantly the naysayers say, aha, that's fake. It's not real. No, hold on. Efficient energy. This is increasingly what humans have sought to be doing through our advancement in technology, is more efficiently control energy. That's basically everything that we do.
Yeah, and when you watch the MH370 videos, that's a good explanation for it, because we see this plane get blipped out of the sky, but it's not this massive amount of energy release that we would expect from conventional understanding of physics. It's just this tiny little blip. But that Boeing 777 represents a huge amount of energy due to its mass.
I'm gonna throw it out there for the anime nerds.
Yeah.
In Full Metal Brotherhood. Full Metal Alchemist, Brotherhood, and the original. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that at all. Mm-hmm. It's they live in a world of alchemy, and they can draw circles that control the flow of alchemical energy. And so they can draw a circle on a rock, and then the rock will reshape into a spear or something. Mm-hmm. There's one guy, however, Scar, who has markings, but when he tries to transmute, things explode. And they describe it as, in the show, he's not completing the process of controlling the energy. He's stopping halfway, which is the destruction before the reformation. The reason I bring that up, somewhat just to shout out all the nerds who are getting all giddy and excited because I like Full Metal Alchemist, but when we look at what we're doing with atomic bombs, for instance, that is simply the destructive process. We've figured out a way to release tons of energy. We can't control it. So this tiny object that we have can release an insane amount of energy, and it's destructive. Yep. What would happen if humans actually figured out how to take extremely dense forms of energy and then control what that energy does in an extremely efficient way?
Yeah.
So instead of just having it explode, guide the energy in certain directions. How could you do it? I'm just saying if the technology advanced to where you can have a tiny little bit of uranium blow up a whole city, or antimatter, antimatter explosion, substantially more powerful. If we could actually control how the energy flows, you could do tremendous things. So right here, for instance, you can see on the screen we have this UFO floating, and it's a magnet surrounded by other magnets. It's quite simple. Yep. If we, or I should say when we, because I believe it is possible, maybe we already did, figure out how to utilize all of that energy that's in such a tight space, not just to create an explosion, but to guide that energy in a solid direction, we can levitate things very easily. There's tremendous amounts of energy all around us. Yep. So let me put it like this. An atomic bomb uses a very small amount of uranium or MOX plutonium, whatever it is we're using, to make a explosion so massive it can vaporize an entire metropolitan area, depending on which bomb you're using. If all of that energy in such a small space was just focused in a very tight space upward, instead of forcing everything around it at hundreds of miles an hour outward, it would just hold itself.
It might have something to do with developing a magnetic monopole when you're talking about teleportation and momentum through what do you call this visceral reality? But they don't exist naturally in nature, from what we know, and you got to create it artificially because every magnet naturally splits into a north and a south. But if you can have a magnet that's just a north, then you can aim it and have great propulsion.
I've seen weird stuff they've done where they've like bent magnets so they can create awkwardly positioned poles. And then they use that for various tools. I was watching a video, it was like a TED Talk or something. I don't know. I feel like you got to explain. Are we crazy?
Oh, no. Actually, make a lot of sense. And so I want to make a comment. One thing about Ashton just mentioned about what is the laser, the black trace of the laser beam. So the principle is no different than we use a radar locked in fighting airplanes and follow the trace. But laser is a more high energy, more modern technology to trace. So this is a very common. So there's nothing to be surprised about.
Yeah, if I could jump in, what we see with the plane is magnetic monopole, because you're seeing this plane get encapsulated and then it's just not there anymore. You could think of that as like a positive or a minus, which would mean that, the other side is going to be a positive or minus. Like last time I was actually on here, I brought Dave Rossi, who's a defense contractor engineer. He's the guy that came up with the fourth orb hypothesis, which is that, this is a closed loop system. And what this would mean is that each of those three orbs spinning around the plane, imagine them each having one negative charge. So combined, they would have 3 negative charge. Okay, well then the other side, we would expect there to be 3 positive charge on the fourth orb, which is the destination. So when that plane disappears and escapes out of our space-time for a brief second, where's it going to show up? Well, it's going to be attracted to the location of the opposite charge, just like normal.
A magnetic monopole would effectively give us free energy.
Oh, definitely, because now that's teleportation. Now we're talking, I'm pulling something from over there and bringing it to me.
So one of the things you see often on the internet, these perpetual motion machines, is they'll get a bunch of magnets and they'll align them at an angle and the wheel will start spinning. The problem with that is magnetic dipoles retract and repel, so it's going to lock in place. It's not just going to get pulled forward, it's going to stop, unless you're using an electromagnet, which is you're pumping energy into the system. If we were able to create physical monopole magnets that were just pulling, it's going to keep spinning.
And so you know what they do for that. And so magnetic motors are real and are possible. It's just not easy to pull off. But Yes, the answer is use an electromagnet. Why? So when the magnets are aligned in a certain way, they're going to attract. But once they get to this point where they're even, now they're going to try to pull backwards. It's going to resist. So what do? You've got your attractive force that you want, but then once they get to this point, now if it keeps going, it's going to pull back. What do? Well, I flip the magnetic pole. So use an electromagnet, you flip this off at the exact right moment, and now this side will keep going. Then you turn it back on again when the next one comes around.
That's a railgun.
And so it's just all you're doing is pulsing off or on your electromagnet. And theoretically, then now if your pulse is cheaper than how much energy you're producing from that rotation.
But it's effectively what a railgun does.
Yeah.
They take a magnetic metal, a ferrous metal of some sort, shape into a bolt, and then you have a series of electromagnets that they turn on and off rapidly in succession, which pulls the bolt and then flings it out of the gun at a high speed.
I have a demonstration,
Yes.
but I could not bring the track with me, so I cannot. I have all the magnets to demonstrate the real gun. Yes.
We need liquid nitrogen to do quantum locking and stuff.
Oh yeah, there's
We
similar
don't have
thing.
the liquid nitrogen today. That real quick, I want to address some other points because yes, I want to challenge all the academic physicists out there to try to debunk the claims that we're making. I'm also open to a debate. Any academic physicist or professor who wants to debate about zero-point energy's topics, happy to debate about it. Free energy is real, but it is a misnomer. It's just extracting zero-point energy, or any system that produces over unity can be considered free energy. The first law of thermodynamics is not violated. Energy is not being created or destroyed in this situation. We're just pulling it from a different source. The zero-point energy, the ether. The second law is not violated either. Why? You would say, well, no system can be perfectly efficient, but we have another input. So we have one normal input that we're putting in, and then we have an extra input of the zero-point energy. And what that means is now when you combine those two, even if the overall system is only 90% efficient, your output might still be greater than 1. That means over unity again. So yes, it is possible to produce over unity systems. And this also means that we're going to reach a point where there is no scarcity on planet Earth. If we can have consistent over unity systems that are producing more energy out than what they're getting put in, we're going to get to a point eventually where we have infinite energy. And also alchemy is also real. Is that when you look at cold fusion specifically, they are seeing transmutation of elements in those processes. It was reproduced many times over. If you talk to any expert in low energy nuclear reactions like Bob Grenier, alchemy comes along with it. And what this means is we are looking at Star Trek replicators in our future. Probably not in our lifetimes, but at some point it's going to happen. The last thing I want to say is that nukes, I didn't think we were going to talk about nukes, but Dr. You and I were talking about it on the ride over. And I was reading Friedwart Winterberg's Principles of Thermonuclear Explosions yesterday, actually. And in the very first introduction, just straight up says they classified fusion research because a nuke has 2 stages. Has the fission stage where the atoms are being separated, and then they flow into like a new area where the fusion stage occurs. And the fusion stage is where then you have this reaction occur, and it's being confined by this particular metal, and eventually it amplifies, and you have your massive explosion. And what they said was that they hid the fusion research because of nuclear weapons. It's all been classified since the H-bomb, and the H-bomb was specifically when they figured it out. So I propose they figured out this concept of zero-point energy, space not being empty, like during the Manhattan Project or right after. And that's when John Archibald Wheeler and Richard Feynman said, the amount of energy that's in this zero-point energy is not this tiny, insignificant amount that academic physicists will tell you. They said it's 10 to the 120. That's 120 zeros. They said it's practically infinite. They said it's so much energy that the empty space in the size of this can could vaporize all the Earth's oceans. All the Earth's oceans. So it's this huge amount of energy that's available. And Friedwart Winterberg, the same guy that wrote the nuclear explosions textbook, he has a theory called the Planck ether hypothesis. So we're bringing the ether back. We're going, okay, the ether isn't this viscous fluid that we're like gonna touch and feel. It's this quantum extra dimension filled with energy, and we're living on the surface, and we can't see this extra dimension that's right there all around us all the time. And his theory of the Planck ether hypothesis is essentially the same as zero-point energy, saying that this space-time energy explains mass. It explains inertia, why we feel resistance when we move around. It explains distance. Why is there distance when there should be no distance at all? And it also explains dark energy and dark matter too.
Okay, so you touched so many topics. So let me bring my understanding of physics, bring some understanding to what you're talking about. Number one, I want to emphasize Ian's point. Say, we always confuse with a perpetual motion machine versus real phenomena. So actually, we do not have a perpetual motion because Ian mentioned that we have an open system. You only have a problem with a perpetual motion is you have a closed system, no energy input, right? So now you constantly running does not make sense. But in this case, the space actually called permeated or filled with matters of substance, not just say purely we talking about the ether. So that's where we bring this called 0 point energy point. So 0 point energy basically means it's the lowest state of the universe, right? So at almost 0 degrees, we're supposed to there's no motions. Why they have energy? That's exactly emphasized. The space is not empty. Mm-hmm. Now say, what is in space? Most people say ether, but ether has this negative connotation, like a hypothetically stuff. I wanted to give it my version is the space filled with fluid, magnetic fluid, made by just a small magnets. Just you mentioned, whenever you subdivide magnets, you're always kind of smaller. So how small this I'm talking about this is called a magnetic fluid could be billions of times smaller than electrons. You know, electron we consider one of the smallest fundamental particle, regardless the neutrino, right? Yeah. So neutrino is supposed to like 10 million times smaller. Magnets can be infinite subdivided. And this infinite subdivided and fill out the entire space. So we are not just say fish living in the water have a medium of the ocean water, right? We are living on the earth, we're surrounded by atmosphere, right? In space, we said the space is a plasma field or something. Actually, that's what field we call I call the Yuan magnetic field. So that means filled with the substance. That's the substance. Huh. Evidence is that substance carry transverse light wave. And that's the same substance carry gravity. So gravity just magnetic. We have I call the universal magnetic medium.
I think that
I see your fly
have you heard of UNRWA radiation? There's this phenomenon.
Yes, radiation.
Oh. It's there's this idea of quantized inertia, and it's this theory that, like a boat in the ocean, you got the waves going up and down. Well, if the boat is
Yo,
I never tried that one.
how do we get this on camera?
Is that on the camera now?
I don't know. There's no way to film the
Magnetic river
table.
stuff over here.
So you demonstrated this is not a fake can.
Yeah, so I've got, this is the doctor's fly stick. It's a toy, generates static electricity.
That's all they do.
And I got my tech deck, and I held it next to it, and it pulls.
Pulls it
Where was
forward, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
You probably have a little bit upper. You turn around. Oh yeah. It started going. Yeah. Probably you have the table is not perfectly flat.
Yeah, so
Or so it moved the skateboard.
Yeah, move a skateboard. you can easily move this one.
Yeah, the can's very easy.
I wonder if what it is it's similar to this UNRWA radiation, where if you have
wait,
a
I got an
boat,
idea.
check this phenomenon out. If you have a wall and then you have a boat in the water, you have a wall, and then the boat's floating there. The waves coming in are being broken by the boat. So the waves on the other side of the boat, between the wall and the boat, are smaller.
Let me
the
try
radiation
over
has been
here.
diminished. Therefore,
The camera.
the boat slowly gets rocked towards the wall. You might call that gravity or
Put it as-
magnetism, but it's actually a
Close to
diminishment
the
of
edge, close to the
radiation
edge.
because of
Yeah, we
because
can,
of
so we
the
can see it.
now?
diffusive properties of the matter.
I'm trying to demonstrate that everything gravity can do, electromagnetic force can do.
Yeah.
How many times better? 10 to the 36 power. Billions, 4 billion times better than this one.
Do you think that it's possible that gravity is a resonating frequency of magnetism?
Here, let me.
That's exactly the point. For gravity is just part of a magnetic force, attraction.
Yeah. And people will say, well, electromagnetic force can't account for gravity because gravity is too weak.
Oh my goodness, you made it work.
and so yeah.
It's a.
And by the way,
Too bad the camera cannot see it.
I don't. Yeah, the camera can't see. But my fingerboard here, it's the Tim Pool Boonies Pro model, and this will use the static electricity pulls it. Yep. I can put it on the table.
Oh, okay. Well, I just explained this UNRWA radiation. I'll do it again really quick. So you've got a wall in the water and a boat floating in the water, all these waves coming in, but the boat is breaking the waves. So the waves between the wall and the boat are smaller than the waves in the ocean. Therefore, this boat that's hanging here just starts to get slowly rocked towards the wall because of the diminishment of what's called UNRWA radiation. And so you might consider that gravity or magnetism, that it's blocking its own substrate and therefore is getting pulled. It's almost like a vacuum is being created in the radiation.
Yeah, and so that's very analogous to the Casimir effect, right?
Camera can see that one.
Yeah.
And what we're doing with the magnets here, this is just Eric Laithwaite's magnetic river, which is that like if you have a spinning object, it will actually flow opposite potentially of the direction of the flow of the magnetism in this case. So you can actually get it to go, what object go, the opposite of flow of like a river. So normally if a river would cause them to flow downstream, but it can actually cause things to flow upstream in this situation.
Oh, check this out. Tim's about to.
Can you see it?
That's just static electricity in action.
Yeah, it's hard.
You on the other side because it's not even.
It's working.
Okay. Yeah, it works once you put horizontal on the table. It works. Just goes.
What is that? Is it just like a battery and it's creating a static?
Just a battery. Create something. A brush rotate.
Now, on the table it goes.
On table.
You could see it though. Proof of concept on the.
Or you want me to try here because the camera can see it.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you do right here. You know where the foot.
I mean, it was working perfectly over there.
Yes.
Where
Okay.
are we at?
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Dude, that's happening with our communication.
Not
too.
fake it, right?
That's why they say.
So
When they see people have magnetic personalities, I think they're talking about that.
So gravity is a 0-point fluctuation force. It is related to this ether, this energy that permeates space-time. And we know gravity waves exist. LIGO detected gravity waves in 2015, but people had already figured out high-frequency gravitational waves way before that. Lab produced gravity waves. LIGO is only detecting low-frequency gravity waves, things that come from astronomical bodies, not things that might be produced on a tabletop type setting. And one of the first things people say is, well, gravity, how can gravity be related to electromagnetism? Electromagnetism is so much more powerful than gravity is. But if you look at the forms, the equations for Coulomb's force and gravity, you'll find that the forms of the equations are exactly the same.
Identical.
Identical. You have just a constant, and then you have mass 1 or electric force 1 times mass 2 or electric force 2 divided by r squared, right? And it's the same for both of them. So then the question is, why are those constants different? And this is where I pass it over to Dr. Yu for his example, right?
Yes, that's exactly what's wrong with Newton's gravitational equation. It assuming the higher mass, gravity was proportional to mass, to the mass. The higher mass, you will have a higher gravitational force. That's exactly what's wrong when you use Newton's law to look at what is a galaxy rotating, spiral galaxy rotating. You said, how could some galaxy on the edge of the universe, right? On the edge of a galaxy, rotate so fast? Newton's law just does not generate enough force to them because that interaction is not a Newtonian interaction. It's not based on the mass. It's based on what is called the electromagnetic attraction, which is a 10 to the 36 power, which means 10 times 36 zeros higher than gravity. So if you replace Newton's law, wrongly assuming force higher than mass, because at that time we do not know what mass is, okay? Just so that's why we have this called dark matter. Because we're missing matter. And we have a black hole at the center of the galaxy. We found something rotates super fast. And we're missing mass. exactly what's wrong with you. You're assuming something proportional to mass, so you do not have enough mass. It's a magnetic force.
So the reason they invented dark matter is to explain, well, if it has to be gravity that's making the galaxy spin, then there must be a form.
Must be more mass.
But they haven't ever detected it? They're just assuming, but it's actually magnetism, you're saying. Or
If we're in a medium, then it solves the problem of dark energy and dark matter at the same time. Like dark energy is what we use to explain why the universe might expand faster than the speed of light. So if I just imagine pouring some paint all over the table right now, and we imagine that paint is the 0-point energy, it's going to spread all along throughout the table, right? In a thin layer. That's our space-time. And then dark matter, yeah, we just invented dark matter. We must have more mass in our galaxies because these stars at the edge of the galaxies are moving too fast. But if we're in a medium, that solves that problem too.
Yes.
In fact, it also solves the 3-body problem as well. So 3-body problem says any 3 orbiting bodies can't stay stable in the long run. Eventually, one of them will be expelled out. So if you look at our solar system, we have 9, or depending on how many you want to count. And why we have Jupiter on the outside of us, which is huge. So every time we get close to Jupiter, you would think it should pull us a little bit further away from the sun. And over billions of years, we should have been expelled out of the solar system already. Classic physics can't explain this. I was listening to Neil deGrasse Tyson try to say, well, it just cancels out. What the hell do you mean it cancels out? We're going near Jupiter every time. What cancels that out? Nothing cancels that out. And so they can't explain this. But 0-point energy explains it because there's more stickiness there than what we think because we're in a medium at that point.
Yeah, so that 3-body or millions of bodies right now, we're talking in the universe, that tell you how flawed Newtonian gravity theory. Okay.
So let's jump to. Oh, go ahead. Keep going. Sorry.
Yes. And I try to say, so what make everything's in play? The reason we cannot solve 3 bodies, Newton force is a center to center, mass center to mass center, does not have enough constraint to a free body in space. You each, assuming rigid body, need 6 degrees of freedom. Now you have 3 bodies. Newton force only one dimensional from the center to center. Does not have enough control. Of course, it's a chaotic universe, right? Yep. If you change Newtonian to electromagnetic force, everything just works the same way as we observe.
You say they move in six dimensions?
If you want to control, let's say, a rigid body, every rigid body you have 6 degrees of freedom in order to
all the different directions.
In order to able to describe its position and orientation.
Okay, so that's left, right, up, down, forward, and
the rotation.
And rotation.
On each axis.
And then in chemistry, the hexagon is super stable. The 6 points creating this inward pressure.
Yeah, you would see a stable chemical elements, right? Has a symmetry, some kind of distribution. Yes, something related to that one. I wanted to emphasize one thing about you talking about the global, I call the magnetic medium. So people questioning, how do you know there's a matter fill out of space? What's the evidence is? This is the same medium, magnetic medium, to transmit the signals from the Voyager 1. We have a Voyager 1, Voyager 2, both outside of solar system. We can still communicate, just longer hours, right? And through the same medium, electromagnetic medium. So we receive signals right now, right? And more importantly, that's the same electromagnetic medium transmit human thoughts. Why people can call it telepathy, can sense your feelings, sense your thoughts thousands of miles away.
It's called ephaptic coupling. It's where 2 neurons...
Exactly. This coupling, talking about it's a good term. However, mechanism is through this electromagnetic medium. I call that ion mediums. Okay.
So that's a fun story because there's a famous quote by Ben Rich, or a story from Ben Rich. He was a Lockheed Martin Skunk Works director. And he said, we've got stuff in black projects that will never come out, but anything you could imagine that you've ever seen, we can already do. And somebody kind of confronted him about this and said, how is all this stuff you're talking about possible? What's the physical mechanism? And he goes, how is ESP possible? The guy thinks about it and goes, that's a weird thing. He goes, all points in space and time are connected. And Ben Rich says, exactly, right? So to your point, yes, there is this coupling that must be happening.
Connected.
It's connected.
Human thoughts connected.
Yeah, through
human feeling connected. Through what? Same universal magnetic field.
localized magnetic fields. The Earth has one, the sun has one, the galaxy has one. And if you look at the fields, the line goes straight up. You'll see the fields go like in this shape around the body, but then you'll see right in the middle, one line will go straight up. And that's going to like the galactic field, which is then going straight up to the universal field, which is going up to the universal 2 field or whatever. And within these greater fields, we're able to communicate.
Well, so here's the thing that's important too, is that the 0-point energy is electromagnetic in nature. You can even listen to Leonard Susskind, famous astrophysicist, say that we know that even if you take out all the heat and all the light from a region of space, we still have this 0-point energy, the lowest ground state. But there's still something there. This electromagnetism is there, but there's no mass. They say that at least there's no mass, but maybe it's just made up of these neutrinos or relic neutrinos or what have you. But what does this mean then? You know, if we think about what are some of the scientific discoveries that have come out that could be there could be implications. The first one I think about is that EM drive, the impossible drive that they talked about a few years back. It was like 10 years ago or so, where they were testing this, basically just a cone.
Yep.
It was a cone, and the idea was that it would produce asymmetric thrust. And the way that's possible is because we're in a medium. If you're in a medium, this is now just the same concept as like how a submarine works. Submarine is just displacing the water around it. So it's basically swimming through the medium of the water. This would be the same thing that the EM drive was doing. So this is where I want to ask Dr. Yu here, because NASA is the ones that actually tested the EM drive.
Oh, you're talking about the Eagle Lab.
You guys know who tested the EM drive?
Negative.
By chance?
Wait a minute.
Well,
no.
go ahead and we'll tell them, Dr. Yu.
We call it Sunny White.
It was Harold Sonny White. Harold Sonny White was just on Joe Rogan like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he was having Joe Rogan hold a free energy microchip.
I saw that.
Chip. Yeah. He goes, here's the prototypes. He goes, hold on to this. He's like, if we make an array of this on our wafer, these microchips, it can produce, I think he said like 3 watts or something like that, but enough where you could put it in your phone and your phone would never run out of battery ever again. And I'm just going, wait, the same guy that tested the EM drive for NASA, and by the way, found anomalous thrust with it, they just kind of covered up. He found anomalous thrust. He's on Joe Rogan handing out free energy microchips. And the best part was he shows him the free energy microchip and he goes, oh, and while we were testing this free energy microchip, we just decided to see if the energy pattern that it creates is consistent with a warp bubble. What you just thought, oh, maybe this would also allow warp drives to happen, because what they're doing is they're saying, we are extracting this energy from the 0-point energy field. And that could represent negative energy density. The negative energy density is exactly what we need for a warp drive or a wormhole, according to Miguel Alcubierre's 1994 warp drive metric. So it's clear what Sonny White's really thinking. The message he's putting out there is going, we can produce negative energy. It's just not what we were thinking. It's essentially extracting this 0-point energy from space-time itself, produces this negative energy density. And we know this is true. It's proven to be true. We have the Casimir effect, proves it. Similar to what you were saying before, is we just take 2 uncharged metal plates, put them very close together, and just have them sit there. They'll come together all on their own. No external force whatsoever. Why? Because certain wavelengths of the 0-point energy can't fit between the plates. And if that's the case, that means there's less wavelengths on the inside than there is on the outside, which causes pressure to occur. This is what Harold Sonny White's saying. We can engineer this at the micro scale with microchips. And potentially we can scale that up. And if we could scale that up, then we could create all the stuff that you see in Star Trek all the time.
Yeah, I want to give a physical basis of where this 0-point energy comes from. Okay, so since we, I try to replace the word called the 0-point energy, just like replace ether with called the universal magnetic fluid, which is a real substance, and we can also replace the 0-point energy. Use the word. This is called the universal magnetic fluid. That's the medium. And so now you're talking about where does this energy come from, right? So that's at the lower state. Did you see we have sunlight? Lots of lights traveling we see a lot of different lights, lots of different explosions happening in the star system and in the galaxy. These are the external energy make this medium vibrating. So that's where energy is infinite level of energy. As long as the universe exists, so you would have the vibration. That's the energy existed.
Is it because electrons can, I was wondering about electrons and fermions in general, that they can spin down in one area as another one spins up elsewhere? They don't just have to move through space. They can actually spin down and recreate elsewhere. And so you might see a star 100 billion light years away is actually creating energy here.
Entanglement, yeah.
Yeah. So that must be entanglement, right? That's the concept of entanglement. Go ahead.
What is the underlying function of entanglement?
Oh, okay. You want me to answer?
I guess I'll start. Sure. So, I mean, when we think about entanglement, that's where I think you have to have a medium. If you have one thing happening over here and super, super far away, we have another thing happening that's an equivalent. Like I move to the right here, I get equivalent movement. There must be a connection between those 2 points. So I'm not sure if the camera can see this, but we could imagine that our 3-dimensional reality is actually a 2-dimensional reality, and we're living on top of this table. And we can't see up. We can only see left or right. But we know there's more to our reality. We because we're higher dimensional beings, we can see that there's more to this space that's all around us. So what's entanglement then? Entanglement is just me taking my hand and putting 2 points between this 2-dimensional space. We now can see there is a connection between these 2 points. But if I'm living on the surface, I can't see that. I can only see the physical manifestation in front of me.
So it's if there is a particle that's entangled, you could imagine it like we see this one electron here, miles and miles away there's an electron here. When we apply a charge here, we see the same effect on both sides, but it's actually, in a higher dimension, they're actually connected.
And so this is where I wanted to talk to you, because I remember before I even wanted, the reason why I wanted to talk to you originally over a year ago is because you were talking about you've seen faster than light communication or quantum communication systems. And
I've not seen them.
But
I've spoken with people who work in government who say that, well, I'll say this too. They were like, this is confidential. You can't repeat this.
Yeah.
Oh, it's been 3 or 4 years, so I'm repeating it now. But they said it's actually, I mean, come on, let's be real. We know about entanglement. This is mainstream science. This is not any kind of weird stuff. You go to any university, they'll talk about entanglement. Obviously, big corporations are trying to figure out how to instantaneously send data. You need only send 2 bits, just yes or no, over this entanglement to be able to transmit data. And then to upgrade your speed and data transmission, you just need more entanglement. Naturally, once a university says, oh, hey, entanglement, we can do it, any billionaire is going to be like, I need this. And so they've probably been researching and investing in this for decades.
Yeah, no, they've figured it out. And if you pull up, I had some slides that I presented for the Cosmic Summit last week. Slide number 25 talks about quantum entanglement and non-locality. This is one of the Defense Intelligence Reference Documents. They're called the DIRDs. These were classified papers that were released around 2017. They were some of the most popular scientific papers on the Pentagon's private servers ever. This one is written by John Kramer. He's an experimental nuclear physicist out of University of Washington. And he explains exactly how they do what you just said, because we know quantum entanglement exists. What they say, though, is that there's no way to manipulate or transfer information, because if I were to try to measure the movement of the one electron, entangled electron, it breaks the coherence down. Coherence falls apart. So we can't just say, okay, I'm going to move this one to the right, and then this one will go to the right. We can't do it. It's not that simple. But they figured out a way to get around that problem. With entanglement, these EPR experiments, they call them, they're Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen experiments. They're basically like double slit experiments. What they do is they shoot one electron, or one particle goes this way, and we're going to just see what that does. That's our base. We send the other one down a different path, and this is where we manipulate the second path. We can change the distance of the path. What they did was they set up a switch. They basically say, okay, we're going to send this down this path, and we're going to have like a train track. We're going to say, you either go A or you go to B. And if you go this way, on the double slit experiment, you get the 2 slits. And if you go the left way, you don't get the 2 slits, you get the wave pattern. And so now what this means is if I'm looking at the right, I either see the wave pattern or I see the double slits. And you can see
That's your yes or no.
That's a yes or no. That's your yes or no. And it only takes a few photons for them to be able to tell exactly what pattern it is. And so the amount of time it would take like a computer to be able to tell which shape it's showing you is like a fraction of a second.
Yeah.
So now you've created binary. And so now you can just flip your switch off or on, and as long as you have a 2-way communication system, like walkie-talkie type stuff, you can send a communication, and now it doesn't matter the distance.
That is the core function of all computers.
Yep.
Just a whole bunch of yes and no.
Yep. And so what this would allow you to do is it's not going to potentially allow retrocausal communication. Like you're not potentially going to be able to transmit to the past, although more to come. But it would allow you to like control the Mars rover on Earth in real time, which we would consider to be impossible because it's super far away. But you could do that. Or for the gamers out there, no lag. The quantum internet, which is coming, will have no lag. You'll be able to play against those kids in South Korea, and it'll be all real time.
And then what happens when they can Neuralink you?
Yeah, well, that's a whole
real time, lag free universes, interplanetary. It's like that show Altered Carbon.
Yeah.
Where they don't actually travel from planet to planet because that would take too long. In the show, they established colonies on other planets that took hundreds of years to do and set up faster than light communications. And if you want to go from Earth to, say, Mars, you don't get on a rocket. You network your consciousness into a new body, and it transmits faster than light your consciousness into a new body on that planet. So you're there.
Okay, I wanted to give a physics explanation of this entanglement. Okay, I want to bring the audience on. Okay, so whenever we say two particles, normally just like you said, electrons, right, spin up, spin down. You find out that whenever you do experiment, right, you always spin up and spin down two electrons or photons, exactly opposite, and then to generate why when it has to spin up, when spin down, they are magnets. Magnetic locking. They are created the same thing, the neutral and the send it out. So I try to say you can have called entanglement, so magnetic locking without invoking extra dimension. Oh, really? Magnetic force itself locked them there. And Ashton said is very important. A lot of experiment claim we discovered this and that one. When you use instrument to measure them, you break the coherence.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the unwind of the conference. We find out a lot of measurements actually is because of the measurement equipment altered their orientation. So
what they're saying, go ahead.
Magnetic locking would be sort of like a phaptic coupling, where you get two electrons 100 billion light years apart are locked together. It looks like entanglement, but it's actually through the localized magnetic field of the galactic.
One thing, they have to generate it simultaneously. This particle, and then send it, spread it to billions of light years away. So in order to, we're talking about called quantum entanglement. You are not generate two quantum particles a distance away. No, that's not the case. We are talking about simultaneously generate twin photons or twin electrons. Now they started with opposite pole attract, right? They started locked. Now you send it far away. And they said, now you change when the other one will change. But a lot of measurement is due to, change is due to error of measurement equipment will alter their orientation.
Yeah, measuring things is like poking and prodding them.
Exactly. Influence, the measurement equipment process influence the behavior.
I may be wrong on this, but I think they're trying to get around that too. I think they call it coincidence something or other. So the idea is that right now with entanglement, we have to produce it right on demand. So you shoot out a laser and they're entangled from the point where they're created. But the next step would be, can I just produce entanglement from two existing things that are already out there?
So they try to do that now?
That's what I'm pretty sure they're doing. And I think they're doing it through Bose-Einstein condensates, which is basically cymatics using frequency to manipulate matter. And they can reverse engineer like a vortex motion. If you imagine there's this extra dimension, kind of like with your bathtub, if you pull the bathtub drain, you're gonna have this vortex. We don't really see the water going down that. We don't see the water in the drain, but we know it's going down that drain. And so what they can do is from our three-dimensional reality, they can say, oh, we see this entanglement process. We can reverse engineer the Schrodinger equation and figure out what is that actually doing through the medium, through the extra dimension, which would allow you then to produce entanglement anywhere you want at will. And I think that's essentially where they're at right now, which is essentially manipulating reality.
You're saying they're able to infer the dimensions of the matter that they want to entangle, or
yeah. So like we have this. So again, if we're on this flat two-dimensional surface, but we know there's this extra dimension up here, we could see the shape of that extra dimension interacting on our 2D surface. Like it might just look like a circle, right? If it was actually a vortex. But they can look at that and they go, okay, they can assume there's this extra dimension, and they can say, okay, well, based on what the shape we see, we can tell the tilt of the vortex in the extra dimension. And they go, okay, well then all we have to do, once we have our tilt, we can just find out what those vectors are. We can solve for the vectors, and now we can produce an exact opposite interaction that we want.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you create the opposite of the particle to essentially instantiate a
Depending on what you want to do, if you want to produce something out of
entanglement.
nothing, you know exactly what kind of frequency you need to do to produce it. If you want to counteract something, then you could reverse engineer the interaction and counteract that.
in regards to things having to be, you were saying in order for an entanglement to occur, two photons have to be created at the same spot and then sent apart.
And through the same medium.
And I wonder about the beginning of the universe, the Big Bang they call it, but I see it sort of as like we're in a torus and we're constantly, the reason why you see a red shift in the further reaches of space, they think it's getting further away faster so that the wavelength is actually getting longer. But I'm like, well, maybe you're just seeing the wavelength from a different angle. So it looks very short, and then you see it from here, and now all of a sudden that same wavelength, it looks a little more red because it looks, so the universe is bending around and wrapping through this toroidal center, and where everything is coming together and re-entangling and then exploiting out, and now we're all entangled. But that's different than actual entanglement. Apparently, as far as
exactly. So you just mentioned about basically the space-time something. I want to emphasize one thing is when we say something expand, right? The current explanation is space itself is expanding, right? So you said, hey, redshift is not because of things moving away. It's due to space expansion and the drag, everything in it expand. That's a fallacy. Space actually is space itself is not a geometry, which is so that's why we said, space, what they call distort space-time create gravity. So we have another interpretation. So so-called space-time is just electromagnetic field. That's a real thing. And if you so-called distorted, you do not need a distorted. The electromagnetic field can generate attraction, so that's what gravity interaction is all through this electromagnetic field.
It's the same thing. If you think of the universe as a torus, I mean, magnetic fields are toruses, so it just tracks that we are in this rotating magnetic field.
And yeah, if you go to Tim, I don't know if you can pull up slide number, probably the first slide or second slides. So
Number one?
Like probably the one right after that. So the first scientist I found was
he knows the exact location there. So.
Yeah, Robert Forward was the first person that showed that we can actually extract this 0-point energy and turn it into charging a battery. And he found that out in 1984. So a lot of these physicists you'll talk to, they'll go, well, yeah, the 0-point energy is there, but there's no way to extract it, even if you have the plates. But yes, Robert Forward showed that, yes, the plates coming together can charge a battery. Now, perpetual extraction, we need something else. That's why they've been building these microchips. If you go to the next slide, Hal Puthoff is the world's leading expert on 0-point energy. And Hal Puthoff is also connected to this UFO topic. He was a CIA guy. He was naval intelligence. He was also a remote viewing guy with SRI, Stanford Research Institute, as well. And Hal Puthoff came up with this paper that says gravity is a 0-point fluctuation force. Gravity as a 0-point fluctuation force. That's essentially the same thing that Dr. Yu is saying here. And Hal Puthoff, this was posted in Physical Review, by the way, guys. So this is not a small paper. These are all peer-reviewed scientific papers. And what he says here is that we can actually, from first principles, we can get Einstein's equations for gravity, considering gravity to be this electromagnetic force produced by 0-point energy. So what that would mean is we're in this 0-point energy, then gravity is the ripples in that, the divots. So if I have this huge mass, like a planet, it's going to create this ripple in the 0-point energy. And then the second paper, I just want to address one more, is the ground state of the hydrogen atom. The ground state of the hydrogen atom, this was the first paper that Hal Puthoff wrote, right before his gravity is a 0-point fluctuation force. And people wonder, why is this paper so important? Ground state of the hydrogen atom does not radiate energy at rest. And the main takeaway is Hal Puthoff says, every atom is constantly in an exchange of energy between the 0-point energy and our reality out there. It's energy is being released into our reality. It's being pulled in through the 0-point energy everywhere. Now, this opens the door to, manipulation of the ether, manipulation of matter, potentially, warp drives, wormholes, all of this stuff. And it also opens the door again to extracting that energy for use.
You know, Nassim Harriman has a paper called the Schwarzschild proton, where he's derived that every proton is actually 2 protons revolving around each other at the speed of light around a black hole, or that each one is a black hole revolving around each other. And that also makes sense with what you're saying, that atoms are actually just taking matter and spinning it. That is just these fluctuation points within the. So I mean, I guess it's just a sense of like twisting space-time.
Yeah, I think Nassim Haramein, I think he's accurate. I mean, if anybody can claim to be a 0-point influencer before me, it's probably him, because he's been on this bandwagon for a while. I haven't personally interacted with him. But I think really to take the next level is like, who are the people that have figured this out, and who are the ones that were hiding it and what have you? And that's where I'm looking directly at Hal Puthoff, and his right-hand man is Eric W. Davis. This guy's been in these UFO hearings sitting next to Anna Paulina Luna, and they're asking him about how many kinds of aliens exist. And I'm going, have you looked at his scientific papers? Teleportation physics study, traversable wormholes, warp drives. He's the world's leading expert on warp drives and wormholes and negative energy. And people are asking him about how many aliens exist. It's like Eric Davis helped the Air Force figure out working teleportation, and nobody seems to want to ask him about it. Just if you go to slide number, which slide number is this? Slide number 13, teleportation physics study. Eric W. Davis paper. Frank Mead of the Air Force Research Labs is the project manager. He's a project manager on like all these papers. And this paper shows there are different types of teleportation as we would think about them. We're not talking about sci-fi teleportation where we're dematerializing things down and then rebuilding it atom by atom. It's more of a polarizable vacuum model, the VM teleportation, which is essentially electrifying the vacuum, because the vacuum is electromagnetic in nature, the 0-point energy is. And that's how we can interact with this 0-point energy. I think that what they're able to do is push that 0-point energy aside, and then we go from our false vacuum to our true vacuum, our true nothingness. And that's where all points in space and time are connected. And that's how you can allow for a type of teleportation event. And last thing is, this would mean too that wormholes and warp drives are the same fundamental physics. The only difference would be how much we're pulling on that 0-point energy. If we pull a little bit on the 0-point energy, it'll pull us forward, according to negative mass theory. If we pull a lot on that 0-point energy, then we create a singularity, where at some point you just vanish.
I think about teleportation and apparition movement, basically. We look at this 3-dimensional reality like we're moving through space, but realistically, we're appearing in place. And then as we think we're moving, we're appearing in place in a new position. We're constantly appearing in a new position. We are teleporting through space. We're more apparating through space. So the idea that we could apparate in maybe in a further position than what 3-dimensionally is that seems very natural.
We should be thinking more in terms of waves than actual particles. And we shouldn't be thinking of everything as being like a real physical thing. We should be thinking of more of being like rendered in a specific location, which is weird for us to think about, because we think of everything as being physical stuff that we're interacting with. But when you really boil it all down, it all comes back to waves. And so, even light, people say, oh, well, light's a particle. They say Einstein was an absolute genius. General relativity is huge because it means that we're all in our own little bubble and we're all experiencing time at a different rate. It just seems like it's the same because we're all on the earth at the same time. So Einstein was absolutely right about that, but he couldn't be more wrong about the particle, light being a particle. So
You ever see this? Yeah. This is how the video game Horizon Zero Dawn renders as you're playing it. The pyramid is your visual, it's the visual direction that you're looking. And so you can see that the world actually forms as you're about to see it.
Yeah. That's kind of how your body moves through space. You form in the new spot. Your body is the map that is constantly moving.
And this is how I imagine the teleportation, is that it's like rendering from one location and re-rendering into a new location, but it's not actually disassembling it. It's just
the reality is we live in a simulation, and the U.S. government just got cheat codes with they're using trainers.
Let's talk about
admins are upset about it.
Let's go into wave particle duality, because when I look at wave particle duality, I think they say is light is photons, particles, rays. I think it's both. I think that what we're looking at is a bunch of beads, and we're seeing the outline of the beads. The 2-dimensional outline is the wave. We're seeing the above, but it's actually, it could be, just depends on how you look at it. But I'm open to interpret.
That's the part. That's part of which Ian mentioned so many parts. That's the double slit experiment. Measure, is that light as a wave or particle? So we have that special topic here, and also photoelectric effect.
Yep.
So, he just say, I believe that's one of the blunder by somebody win Nobel Prize on that one, right? I will explain that. Before that one, I want to emphasize one point. Ying just mentioned about the two black holes, right? Orbiting together. That's something they measure the gravitational wave from interact or orbiting two black holes. Eventually, they are smashed impact. So I want to emphasize what LIGO. That's the facility who measured called the gravitational wave. What they are really measured. What they really measured is so-called gravitational wave is nothing more just electromagnetic wave of the medium, right? That's just a medium. So what they really measured is the medium is electromagnetic wave. However, they explained. The explanation is a mechanical vibration of space. Vibration of space that's created. This is called a mechanical force. Make what is the Earth, what is called fluctuation. That interpretation is not correct. That's my view. I just want to throw something out. So gravitational wave is nothing more just electromagnetic wave. So nothing new. Okay, so we can detect. So that's one thing. And also you mentioned about particles called wave-particle dualities. I wanted to explain. You were talking about the quantum concept of a wave-particle duality, which is completely different than our doing every day. So particle, concentrated point, traveling, right, with a fixed matter, versus a wave. Wave means we have a medium in the environment vibrating. The so-called quantum called wave-particle duality. Instead of talking about this particle, but however, this particle itself can be vibrating wave, could be not concentrated, could be spread like a cloud. It's have nothing to do with global medium wave, like a water wave or ocean wave. Have nothing to do. They said that this particle itself, when you observe it, it's a particle. But when you look at the wave, it's become a wave propagates. So that's why double-slit experiments say, hey, we throw matter particles and find a matter particle somehow behave just like a wave phenomenon, right? Show that one. If you guys are interested, we do have slides on that one. So, but
let me jump in here because I want to throw in some more stuff on this. So
Go
the
ahead.
photoelectric effect. So what happened with the photoelectric effect? We take this piece of metal here, any piece of metal, whatever you want. We shine a light on it. We shine light on it, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the electrons to rip off of it and fly off it. And we can actually measure the kinetic energy of the electrons as they come off of it. So, okay, we see the electrons come off. We measure the kinetic energy. Cool. So then we say, okay, let's increase the brightness. Let's increase the intensity of the light.
that means increase energy level.
Increase the energy level. What should happen? I would think that the electron should fly off with more energy. Just like if I were to punch this book, it's going to go flying off the table, right? But what happens? We shoot more energy at it, and there is no more kinetic energy. The electrons still have the exact same energy when they get released off of the metal. So we say, well, that's weird. How do you explain that? Well, so Feynman would probably say, well, if I were to light a cannon, me lighting the cannon is not equivalent to the force of the cannonball because this is a system that's being interacted with. So what is the answer then? How do we get the electrons to fly off with more kinetic energy?
Yes.
The answer is color. Color? Yes, color. The frequency is what determines how much kinetic energy comes off, not the intensity, the frequency. So what does that mean? So Einstein said, okay, the only way to reconcile this is I need to come up with this quantum of light. And I'm going to change the spoon size of this quantum of light, and that's how I'll rationalize how I can interact with the metal in different ways based on the frequency. But there's a better explanation. The better explanation is just resonance. If we imagine, Dr. Yu was talking about the 6 degrees of freedom and how 2 of them are spin, right?
Surreal.
Imagine we have 2 spinning tops. Depending on how those spinning tops interact, you might have a very violent reaction. Like what's that game people play where they do the spinning thing and they're battling?
Beyblade?
Beyblade, right?
That's right.
So you might have a violent reaction, or if they're oriented a certain way, it might be a very not very violent reaction. So that's the answer, is it's resonance, is that if everything is waves, then that metal, this piece of metal is just standing waves in a resonance. And what that means is that if you hit it with another wave, depending on how those waves interact, you might have very little effect, or you might have a very, very powerful effect. And then the last bit I was going to say on the photoelectric effect is for photons in general. Like if we imagine that light is actually particles, does that really make sense? Like look at this giant room we're in and look at all the lights around us. If that was the case, I could be anywhere in this room and I could see the light, which would mean that these light particles must be filling up this entire room all the time, bouncing around everywhere and hitting us and what have you. Now, if that makes sense to you, that's great. But that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me to think of like infinite amount of particles everywhere, bouncing around everywhere. Instead, what I think of it is we're just in a medium where we're just seeing the disturbance. Therefore, we're seeing a point disturbance here. It doesn't matter where you are in the room because the point disturbance is coming from this point. It's not just bouncing around and hitting my eyes. So did I say that correctly, Dr. Yu, or how would you explain it?
You mentioned about 2 points. One is a photoelectrical effect, which is so important because this is a foundational experiment to justify wave-particle duality. So Ashton made a great job, but I want to give you my version of my explanation because this is so important. If I can label you, the gentleman, if you can show when the slide with photoelectrical effect, that slides. I wanted to make sure. And the second point is while he's bringing up, I will say the second point, Ashton tried to build, how did he know the light cannot be particle? I'm going to demonstrate this one after photoelectrical effect. I hope you guys,
get it.
I try to make sure the audience bring out. You are talking about on level higher than general. I try to bring the general people out here. Photoelectric effect, foundational experiment to justify what is the called wave particle duality. Yeah, the one down. Yes, that's the picture. Yes. Are you able to make it bigger
I'm trying. That's
okay. So why this is so important? Classical physics made 2 mistakes to explain this one. The first mistake is in order to have a photoelectrical effect, so you have to knock electron out, called release, make an electron escape, eject from a particle. That's first mistake. I found out there's never ever losing electron in anywhere. Okay, so that's first mistake. The second mistake is assuming this is this phenomenon only happen to the energy level instead of a frequency. That was Ashton just trying to emphasize. Different current means have a different frequency. So that's why classical explanation failed, and that's how Albert Einstein win Nobel Prize by solving one of the failed assumption. He's still assuming electron has to be knocked out as forming electricity effect. That's wrong. But anyway, what his improvement is, he said, hey, the electron does not only you have to knock that out, but in order to make an electron to out, energy is not exactly the reason. The reason is because they did a lot of experiments. They found, different light.
That's I'm wondering about.
Even the light can release that one. So that's why Einstein said, hey, I'm going to put, depends on frequency. So he solved that problem with Nobel Prize. Okay.
The surface plasma, if you look at the way light interferes with plasma,
yep.
You'll have a cloud of plasma, and at the center you got plasmon. They're called surface plasma, and they're very sensitive to light. And the light will refract off of it exactly like this angle. They'll come in, and it'll bounce. So you get photons bounce off of the plasma, and then it looks like they transfer information to the plasma, because depending on how the light bounces off the plasma reacts differently.
That's exactly come to what's the mistake. They both theory made a mistake. They're assuming create electricity is not about a plasma or something. Actually, it is, if I were to explain that one. They assume you have to release electron, so certain energy. But what really happens is electricity have nothing to do with electron in motion. Right now we explain electricity, say flow of electrons, particle flow in the solid wire, never made any sense to me or to anybody, let me tell you. And what I found out, there's no electron, no particle traveling in any solid wire when you have electricity. So this is just false, because we do not understand what is electricity. Electricity is actually the particles on the surface, say solar panel. When you have sunlight, you create with a resonance frequency. when you resonance frequency, what happens? You resonance with atomic natural frequency induced called resonance coupling. So then what happens is all the particles on the surface of the solar system start vibrating. And that vibration of the particle on the substrate, on the body, that's what electricity is. That's create the electricity flows along the surface body. I hope, Ashton, if you wanted to explain, enforce this concept, it's so important.
Yeah, well, I would say that, we're talking about the ether and that light is a wave here. And one of the things, too, that we can prove that this is potentially the case is, well, people say, well, what about the Michelson-Morley experiment? They'll say, oh, Michelson-Morley showed that we're not in this medium of energy. If Tim, if you could pull up my Twitter on the most recent retweet I just did right now, actually a guy named Martin Gruznik went ahead and he redid the Michelson-Morley experiment, which I think is very interesting and will connect to all of what we were talking about here. So if we can share this video real quick, and we don't necessarily need the sound on, but you can kind of just show it, is that he first takes a standard Michelson-Morley experiment and spins it around horizontally. So this shows that, okay, well, the Earth...
What is this experiment?
Oh, the Michelson-Morley experiment is a laser interferometer. So this actually is kind of similar to double slit or to entanglement, where we split light down two different paths. So we split the light down two different paths, and we want to see, is there a change between one path or the other? If we see some kind of shift, that would mean we must be in some kind of medium because something's moving the light. Otherwise, if we're in an empty vacuum, there shouldn't be any shift of the light at all. So when we spin it around horizontally, we can see right there, there's no interference. There's no shift in the movement there. So you would say, okay, there must not be an ether because you're not seeing the light get manipulated at all. But look what happens when we turn it vertical. So we take the exact same experiment, turn it vertical, and now look what happens. Watch closely. Whoa, that's the interference pattern shifting for sure. So that we can see the interference pattern shifting, but why? The only thing that's happening here is either those light beams are closer to the ground or they're further up in the sky. That's what's happening when it's vertical. And it turns out you can see them shift to the right and you can see them shift to the left. The inflection point where that changes is actually where the mirrors that split the two light beams are perfectly perpendicular to the ground. So what could this possibly be that could account for this? To me, there's only one answer. There is a vertical ether. Well, what is there that changes when we go higher or lower up from the Earth?
Pressure?
Gravity. Gravity changes, right? The further up we are, the less gravity there is. The closer we are to the ground, to the center of the Earth, the more gravity there is. So there's a guy named Ishmael, I believe, out of, I'm going to forget, that's somewhere in the Middle East. They said the ether exists, but it's a vertical ether that's pushing down on us. And this would now connect to, remember, zero-point energy. Gravity is a zero-point energy force. So now what we're saying here is that, yes, mass is displacing space-time, but space-time is zero-point energy. And that's why we see the interference pattern shift here, is that we have a vertical ether. Wherever we get a gradient in our gravity, a gradient in the zero-point energy, you're seeing the ether happen. What do you think, Dr. Yu?
Yes, I want to emphasize this Michelson Morley's experiment. This is so important, okay? So one thing is they try to do, they're assuming this is rotational ether. They try to measure mechanical motion, mechanical ether. And if you realize what I try to say is this is a magnetic fluid. It's a magnetic nature. So that's why they cannot exactly measure mechanical motion. So you see the inference patterns changing, right? Switching, right? So you do detect something. They do have a mechanical motion there, but just tiny, not enough to justify their prediction. However, if you consider this is magnetic fluids, the magnetic influence, that's part of mechanical motion, does not reflect at all. Then you will tell it does have the ether we call the electromagnetic field, right? General ether, because that's carry the light, carry all electrical signals, receiving from the spacecraft, and also our thoughts propagation is all through this field.
I got questions about this Morley experiment, Michelson-Morley. So they spun it around horizontally, nothing changed. We know that. Now they spin it 180 degrees up. So what's happening? Why does it look like it's going to the left and to the right? Is it the angle away from the gravitational force?
It's further away from the ground. Yeah.
It's almost like a time-space Coriolis effect, when there's really funny videos where they'll be in Ecuador or anywhere on the equator, and they'll walk like 30 feet, and then there's a tub they fill with water, and they'll pull the plug, and the water will spin clockwise. Then they wheel the cart 30 feet south of the equator, fill it up, pull the plug, and it spins counterclockwise.
Well, so
due to the rotation of the Earth, they're getting a distortion in the.
What you end up seeing is it shifts left and right every time it reaches a certain plane.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, depending on which plane. So it's either one or two on the image that will determine whether or not it's either shifting to the left or the right as it continues going forward from there.
I kind of imagine it like we're in the three-dimensional space we exist is actually an infinite number of two-dimensional planes stacked on top of each other.
Yeah, that's exactly how you explain dimensions, actually. And that's, there's this like young kid that's like got this video out there. I think he's older now, but that's how he explains it, with stacking books on top of each other.
So
that's how we have to think about it. Yeah.
So with a two-dimensional space, when you're moving within one plane and you're staying within one spatial plane, nothing changes. But when you start moving between an infinite number of planes, you'll start seeing the light start moving as you're going through different.
And that can explain the disturbance in the medium that we're seeing, how light can be a disturbance in the medium. And going back to the double slit experiment real quick, with the double slit experiment, one of the things that I wanted to point out is that John Kramer, the same guy we were talking about EPR experiments before, he's got a theory called the transactional interpretation. And this is important because they can do the double slit experiment. Double slit experiment, if you're not familiar, we have two slits. We shoot an electron at the slits. And you would say,
we have a picture if we can display that.
Oh, do we have a picture on your slides?
And then you explain.
Yeah.
And I will give you my
Which one is it?
interpretation.
The double slit.
Double slit experiment. That's so important. Yeah.
So we have this so we have this electron that we're shooting at these slits. And we would say, okay, if it's an electron, it's a particle, then I should get two slits on the back because it's going through either the left slit or the right slit. But when we do the experiment, we get a wave pattern. We get an interference pattern, which would indicate that the electron is actually a wave going through both slits.
Always different.
So then we say, okay, well, let's set up a measuring device that looks through at one of the slits to figure out where the electron's going through. And the weirdest thing happens. The moment we set up the measuring device, boom, now it becomes two slits, as if it just starts to act like a particle. Here's the craziest part about it. We can do this experiment with light from stars that are billions of light years away. So we can do that with these light, because we call this phenomenon non-locality. It's almost like the universe is reacting to what we're doing. But the weirdest part is, okay, we would say, that's cool. It seems to be some kind of faster than light interaction that's happening there to allow that to occur. But why does it work for light that's billions of light years away? Because if that's the case, then somehow it's like, am I going back in time and changing the way the light was released from the star a billion years ago? And this is where John Kramer says, only my theory can account for this, is that we have an advanced time forward wave moving forward, and that's being met by a reverse time wave. And they couple, and there's an exchange of information that determines what should happen in our reality. And to me, that point goes back to what Tim's saying, is that the answer has to be we live in a simulation. You can't be rendering things in and out of existence without us being in some form of simulation.
I think the issue I take with simulism is that a simulation is a it's a lesser structure built by us, which is a facsimile of the greater. It'd be like saying someone finds a model aircraft and then goes, perhaps there are giant model aircraft that fly. No. We have aircraft, and this is a model of it. Our simulations are just models of the universe. So it's not that we live in a simulation, it's that the universe is a much more complex version of the miniature simulations that we make of it.
Yeah, and
which is quite literally, we don't live in a simulation, we simulate the universe.
And we still make choices. It's not like our lives are a lie. Like, we're still making choices in this universe. So even if it was some kind of simulation, it shouldn't cheapen, reality at all. The last point I want to bring to this, though, is that ER equals EPR. Leonard Susskind, famous astrophysicist, one I was referencing before, him and Juan Maldacena wrote some of the first papers about humanly traversable wormholes. They have this theory called ER equals EPR. Einstein-Rosen bridge, aka a wormhole, is equivalent to EPR, Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen, which is quantum entanglement. That same, why does the wave function break down? They're saying, what if there's some connection between this large-scale effect of a wormhole, according to Einstein, and this small scale effect about how two things can be entangled together.
So in order to teleport or to pass through a wormhole, you need to double slit your location. You might end up anywhere, but if you observe your locality, it's going to land where you expect it to land.
This is exactly what Larry Maurer from Unitel predicted. He said that what we would have to do is find out what the wave function of your object is, like say a Boeing 777 with a bunch of people in it. And you can do this using nuclear magnetic resonance, an MRI, and then rebuild that wave function somewhere else. If you create an exact replica of that wave function, you can trick the universe into thinking, am I here or here? I don't know. Boom.
So that's what I'm wondering. How do we...
Almost like being in a video game and writing a code where you name one location the same as the other location.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if you have two cities and they're both called Ianland, and then you put in code saying if X equals yes, then player appear at Ianland, there's two of them.
So is it like we're creating save spots? If we can get to a location and map the matrix of the location, the what, where, and how much of in this 360 degree, then we can use that as a point that we can always teleport to in the future?
That's like the Prestige almost, right? Because you could think of, you could make clones of yourself if you could have a save point type of situation. And I don't know how weird this is going to get, but I do know that what we're seeing is equivalent with teleporting the plane is equivalent to quantum tunneling. So in quantum tunneling, with just an electron, you take a semiconductor or a superconductor, and you have an insulator, a wall, and then another semiconductor on the other side. And what we see with electrons is even if they don't have the kinetic energy to get over the wall, they're somehow getting through it, according to quantum mechanics. But how is that physically actually possible? It's physically possible because we're in a medium. So there's an effect called the Ehrenhoff-Bohm effect. It's a provable experiment. And it shows if I take a solenoid, which is electromagnetic fields trapped in the cylinder, so there's no electromagnetic fields on the outside of the cylinder, and I shoot electrons past it, you would say nothing should happen. But we see a phase shift. How can we see a phase shift if there's no electromagnetic fields outside of the cylinder? Because it's interacting with the medium. That cylinder isn't just a cylinder sitting there, it's interacting with the medium all around
plasma field.
Yeah, just because you
Creating
can't see the
potentials.
field doesn't mean there isn't one. You're so close to it that it looks like it's not there.
There is no electromagnetic. No, there literally is no electromagnetic field. That's the thing. There's no measurable electromagnetic field outside of the cylinder of the trapped electromagnetic fields. There's nothing physical, but there are potentials, and those potentials we would say are the interaction of the ether, the medium itself. There is something actually happening there, even if we can't physically see that thing happening.
What I meant is hypothetically, because it looks like there's nothing and our tools can't measure it, but if you backed away from it far enough, you would see it was like we were just so close to it that it looked like there was nothing there.
Well,
we can't
experience that extra dimension. Like we don't see that extra dimension. So if we were to see that extra dimension, we would see the ripple in that extra dimension. And this is how quantum tunneling works as well. How is the electron getting through? Because there's an extra dimension and you're seeing the ripple. And now from the perspective of quantum mechanics, you would say there's a probability that the electron's on the other side of the wall. And so what is the analogy then if we say ER equals EPR? We say, okay, that's EPR. We just saw the electron teleport through a wall. It shouldn't be able to do physically. Well, the equivalent is we need to find out what's the barrier of our macroscopic reality. What's the wall? The wall is space-time. The wall is the 0-point energy. That's the wall between me being here and me being in your seat. So if we remove that 0-point energy, if we squeeze that 0-point energy out, then theoretically we can cause macroscopic quantum tunneling to occur.
And are we like interfering with the protonic mass by hitting it with electrons or photons or something? What's causing it to disperse to allow that path?
Well, if you watch the MH370 videos and you look up Salvatore Pais's patents, the U.S. Navy engineer who's become friends with me, by the way.
I interviewed him also. He's great.
You did? Yeah. So he tells me straight up, Hal Puthoff, Eric Davis, Jay Stratton, those guys stopped him from getting his research. Those are all the Air Force spooks, the guys the experts on wormholes, 0-point energy. Straight just told me. They're the guys who stopped him from getting his research done. He clearly has seen their work and figured out how this all functions. And what he's saying is that we create an extremely powerful electromagnetic flux, like an EMP, in a small contained region of space-time. This will polarize the vacuum, electrify the vacuum in that region. And where previously we had white noise everywhere, like imagine a TV with white noise all over it, all of a sudden it's just coherent, it's just clean, just empty. That's how he says that we can interact with 0-point energy. And this is very similar to the idea of a wormhole where they think that conventional physics would say we need this huge amount of energy to produce a wormhole, a huge amount of negative energy. But Matt Visser in the late 90s and early 2000s showed that we only need a very negligible amount of negative energy, because all we have to do is create a thin soap bubble around our object, and that will uncouple it from space-time entirely. And now this can allow for these quantum tunneling effects on the macro scale level. But we need something that can encompass something at a large scale. So what I think they're doing in the plane is they're basically confusing the universe into thinking that it's an electron when these orbs converge on it and create that photonic flash that we see. For a brief second, the universe is like, is that an electron? Wait, where is that supposed to be? And now it's going, it's not there anymore. Now it's over here.
So you're saying you polarize the vacuum. That's like the version of the double slit observation is the polarization. Is observation actually polarizing?
A little bit different. Ashton just reminded me one thing about, so you're talking about the MH370, right? Yeah. What is Tim once mentioned, lots of people have doubt with the first video, which actually I was one of them. When I look at the first video, feels like a video game, okay? However, yesterday, Ashton posted another video, say 10 hours ago, this morning when I look at it, that video show you truly it's not like a video type, show you true flight. And with orbiting true flight, it's not like in background color blue, it's that one. When I look at that one, I thought, wow, this video, not the average person can get it. I asked him, he said the person who got this video was inside the job, but now he has to change the name or something to hide identity. When I look at that one, I said, oh my goodness.
Yeah, if you're
you cannot fake that one. So yeah,
and it's interesting because when you talk to the physicists, everybody always asks me about those videos. Like, hey, why don't you go talk to some VFX experts? And I go, guys, like I already had somebody who worked on these drones at China Lake at Big Safari where they test the drones out, confirmed to me that's Gorgon staring that, right? So I already know. I've already had confirmation. I'm just waiting for other people to do it. But any physicist that looks at those videos should like really be given pause, because you're looking at that and you're going, whoa, this actually matches real electromagnetic physical principles and physics principles as well.
This is something important to decouple the idea of whether or not the video is real is a different conversation than is the technology that you're talking about real, which it is. Yeah. So whether that's actually literally being applied there is almost irrelevant.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what I say
technology
too.
Should be there, yes.
And this is the thing I say about it, is like and this is why I wanted to come here and talk about 0 point energy, because the bigger thing for humanity is getting the science and technology out, having people understand about this. But at the same time, that was 239 people, right, that we can't forget about. And so, that's where I say, I want people to remember that the only reason why I even got to this point with the physics and science is from those videos. And those people their families deserve the truth about what happened.
How do you guys, I like talking about the technology itself, but how do you guys feel about the morals and the ethics of releasing 0 point, the power of the vacuum to the...
Systems of control are predicated upon who has access to energy. Yep. If overnight everybody had 10x more efficient energy access, you'd have no leverage over them for any reason. Okay. So if China were to develop this technology, then all of a sudden the petrodollar is useless and they can fund and create and do whatever they want. They'll be able to expand. They'll be able to literally grow their country, their sphere of influence. If it's to the regular person, right now the economy is predicated upon your access to food and shelter and things like this. And as things improve, it's for people, it's getting harder and harder to control. Humans only actually need a few things. You need shelter, you need food. What happens? Modern civilization in the United States, everybody's basically got it. Nobody wants to work anymore. And so now they're bringing all these immigrants who have lesser access to these things, who are willing to do this work, the jobs nobody wants, they call it, which is not necessarily true. But what would happen if we invented replicators, like in Star Trek, where you could just have a machine plugged into the wall and it can take free energy and then convert it and structure it perfectly into a cheeseburger with the proper amount of heat and browning and spice, just by aligning all the particles perfectly. Why would anyone need a job? Yeah. If I want a cheeseburger, I simply go to the machine and I go, computer cheeseburger. Yeah. Then the guy who says, I need someone to mine cobalt so we can build replicators. The replicators can't make the specific components for replicators. Someone has to do the work that brings in there's always going to be some base level of work required and some person to do it. So in Star Trek, technically, they're like, no, we're beyond this. But if right now we said it's not free energy, it's just insanely more efficient. Our energy return on energy invested is exponentially increased, meaning 1 hour of work will equal 10 years of life, as opposed to it being like 8 hours of work equaling, 2 days of life or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, my phone, I charge it for an hour and I get 15 hours of power.
But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking how much work does a human being have to do to live for how much time? Yeah. So in order to get access to food and water, you can do, I don't know what the number might be, but if you do 8 hours of labor at the lowest level of the United States, you're going to get paid something like $50 maybe after taxes, you'll have $50. How much food can you buy with $50? Mm-hmm. 2 days worth of meals. If you're lucky, you're going to need 2,000 calories on average. So we're looking at about 2 meals. That might only cover 1 day, to be completely honest. Like, it is a struggle right now at the lowest levels. Mm-hmm. What if they said that 1 hour of labor will generate enough energy to produce food for one person to survive for 1 whole month? Well, now the person's going to be like, I'm not going to work. And the person who's running the big corporation that says, no, we need copper, we need minerals mined. We're not at the point where we're just replicating the materials we need. Someone's got to do the labor. Yeah. But if we increase energy, return on energy invested, people are going to say, I ain't working no more. Well, we don't need cheeseburgers. We need rare earth minerals. We need neodymium. We need cobalt. So restrict access to energy, control the flow, and then you can control the system.
Yep. And this is where I'm glad. This is why I need you to wake up. I need Tucker Carlson to wake up, Candace Owens. I need these other people to wake up to this because it's a political issue. It's a political issue. And I can tell you already understand it because you understand Star Trek. You understand the implications of a Star Trek replicator being real. We're talking about the end of scarcity. We're talking about transmutation. Well, how does our society even function? How does capitalism even work if we have abundance? And this is part of the reason where I kind of agree with them hiding it. I mean, to some degree, you start to wonder, like, what even is our culture, our nature of humanity, and is it compatible with this idea of a future in which we have anything that we ever want?
We already know what will happen. It's behavioral sync.
Yeah.
So the laboratory rat utopia. Right now, the way the system works is there's a hierarchy of those who have access and control, and they can restrict to a certain. This is under the assumption that free energy or efficient energy exists. Someone who is, we want to go to Mars. Okay, well, in order to go to Mars, we need a massive amount of managerial power, intellectual power, and human labor to do all of that. We don't have robots to do it just yet. If tomorrow, however, anybody could just replicate whatever they wanted, 80% of people are just going to go jerk off, play video games, and eat food all day. Like, if you could just manifest, if the energy was basically free, imagine if we got to the point where 1 hour of human labor could produce enough energy for the entirety of a human life.
Yep.
That means for every human that exists, you only get 1 hour of labor. Now, you're going to be saying, we need 500 tons of cobalt in the rocket ship that we're going to build to get to Mars, but we can't because we've mass-produced food and shelter and resources. Humans no longer want to do the work to mine the cobalt.
Hypothetically, you could fuse hydrogen into helium into whatever you need to get the cobalt eventually if you have enough electricity.
How? Who does it?
Enough power.
Does a human need to do that labor?
Well, some system has to.
Well, there's going to be a transition,
point is,
right? Like there'll be transitional point.
What I'm saying is, I'm not describing a guy having to go into a mine with a pickaxe. I'm saying we develop technology to the point where, yes, it is a machine that will make the cobalt, but nobody needs to work to do it because energy production is so efficient that cheeseburgers manifest themselves.
And we don't want to make ourselves obsolete. That's a good point.
And the problem we're facing right now is with a lack of purpose. There are relatively fewer people who are driven by goals, like Elon Musk. I want to go to Mars, and he is driven by that mission. But most people, what are they doing? They're voting communists in New York because they literally want to do nothing. Given the opportunity with free energy, they will do nothing. And then you'll have no labor. You'll have no one doing any work. Everything stops. Society collapses.
That's just the economic issues, right? That's just the economic issues. Not to mention the fact that we have breakthrough energy, which is what they call free energy. They call it breakthrough energy. If we have that, then how many companies just become their net future earnings become essentially zero overnight? People that are oil companies, how do they compete anymore? And they basically just brainwashed us into thinking space was not empty at all. And I love that you brought the lack of purpose. I bring this up all the time. There's such a lack of purpose out there right now, and I think that this science can give people that purpose that they're looking for. Elon Musk, I couldn't be more disappointed with. Like, this is our thought leader that wants to take us and make us an interstellar species, wants us to go to Mars, and he thinks we're going to do that with chemical rockets. That's never going to happen, not ever. Like, what's going to happen is we're going to be going to Mars or other solar systems using electromagnetism, electromagnet-based technology and propulsion technologies, plasma and fusion propulsion technologies as well. Really, Elon Musk needs to wake up. Really, really needs to wake up, because...
Or he knows.
He doesn't. I mean, and the reason why I say that is if you watch the Joe Rogan interview, he's not Daniel Day-Lewis. This guy's not an Oscar-winning actor. I mean, he went all in on being blue-pilled about it. He's saying, I would know because I have a security clearance. That's not how that works at all. That's an embarrassing thing to say.
Or he is an Oscar-winning actor, and you're convinced.
It could be. If he is, you know what? Give the man the Oscar, because he's saying, oh, I know Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman, and if they had this technology, they would be competing against me. No, they wouldn't. They control everything. They don't care how much money they have. They don't want to be the guy that has $400 billion. They don't want that spotlight. They want to be flying under the radar. They have as much money as they need. What they have is more powerful than money is power.
Well, people need to understand this too. The amount of money that you need in order to be free from the system is not that much relative to what these companies have. So the question, you know, I was having a conversation recently about this. Let's go back 15 years. I think it was it? No, this is 16, 17 years ago. John McCain was asked, how much money do you need to be independently wealthy? And he said $7 million. It was 2008 or whatever, the Obama-McCain race. And everybody was shocked in the news cycle. They were like, $7 million? Are you kidding? You'd be rich if you had $1 million. And middle-class America. And his point was, no, once you have $7 million, this is back then, you can invest into systems where you will get money back from them and you will be rich forever. That was the threshold by which you are independently wealthy. You put it in the stock market, you put it in bonds, some other semi-liquid investments, and you'll be getting paid off those real estate. So let's just say right now the market's $20 million. Once you have $20 million, you can buy real estate, you can create a portfolio where people are paying you rent, you can invest in the materials. That's all you actually need to be rich forever. And what I mean is private jet rich, infinity pool rich, Ferrari rich. Now hold on, what about these guys who are making billions? What is driving them, and why? And what do they want? You think they want money? They don't want money. Elon Musk was famously sleeping on his friend's couch. He didn't care. Elon Musk can snap his fingers and have anything that man could make. What does he want? Things man has not yet made. He wants rockets. He wants Mars. He wants the things that don't yet exist to get them.
You know, regarding rocketry, and I wonder about, because you brought up these drones, these orbs around the craft, maybe having some sort of electromagnetic, they're like as propulsion tubes, basically. They have something coming out the back and then coming out the front. So they're like little rail cannons, basically. And I wonder if, because I'm obsessed with this idea of a space elevator to get things into orbit, but what if we use drones that could fly into position, aim up, and just shoot shit straight up? With magnetism in these, like, you know, magnetically affected chambers, like big boxes that are like made of nickel or iron or whatever, and we just shoot them up into orbit through these drones that could just appear in place and then go leave, so there's no tether to get
That's
broken.
what Frank Mead was trying to do. They were trying to find single stage to orbit vehicles, and so they found just a clever use of electromagnetism and Lorentz forces with plasma in order to cause that lift to occur.
Well, let's just do this. There's a UFO floating right there on the table. Magnetic levitation is a child's toy. Is it possible to make something substantially more efficient?
Yeah, acoustic levitation. If you can, it's a lower frequency, so you'd probably be able to get more amplification with the same amount of energy.
Is that more efficient?
Well,
the
maybe.
For sound, is sound a mechanical wave? Is that if we look at there's something called sonoluminescence, where they take sound waves in water and light happens. Why? Because cavitation. But what's happening is it's creating an inward pressure that causes light to occur. But how can sound do that? The big part about that is we don't think of sound as a mechanical wave that should be able to pull that off.
Phonons. Yeah,
phonons. Exactly.
I guess it's just a wave. Like you want to call it a laser, you want to call it electricity, you want to call it sound. It's all just waves.
Electromagnetic waves, right? Exactly. And then there's also this concept of scalar wave, scalar beam, which would mean that if we take two out of phase waves that are exactly the same and they cancel each other out, is there nothing left? Classic electromagnetism, Maxwell's equations would say there's nothing there. But is that true? Like if I usually use a rubber band, I don't have one. But if I pull both sides on a rubber band, I would say it's not moving left or right. So is there nothing there? Well, if I keep pulling, it's going to snap. So there is something there. It's the stress in the medium. What we threw out from Maxwell's equations was the scalar potential. It might be relatively small, but it's still significant. It still matters. And that stress in the medium represents our space-time gravity ripple potentially. So what Tom Beard and many other scientists found out was that they can actually make these scalar, like this cancellation effect with just a crystal in front of a laser. So you put a crystal in front of the laser, and now you've got this invisible electromagnetic beam. It's invisible. You can't measure this electromagnetic wave. But if I interfere these two beams like this at a distance, you'll see an interference occur, and where there was nothing before, something appears out of there because of the interference as well. So scalar physics, I think, is significantly important to this concept of interacting with the medium. And people say, oh, well, scalar is just a magnitude. It's not a vector. Exactly. Remember what we've been talking about with entanglement and this extra medium? Yes, we're talking about producing a scalar potential that is interacting with this medium. We're putting energy into this medium that we can take out somewhere else.
So you were talking about the magnitude of nothing. So you're essentially saying the more nothing you have, the greater the potential outcome.
Because it's not nothing, because of the Ehrenhoff-Bohm effect, remember? In the Ehrenhoff-Bohm effect, we have our solenoid where there's technically nothing, but you're seeing the phase shift of the electron. Why? Because we're manipulating the medium. So if we do that very, very powerfully, we should potentially be something similar.
And by powerfully, you mean taking waves that would cancel each other out, but like
higher amplitude, right?
And more faster, like I guess amplitude and frequency of and different types of frequency. Like you want to go 1 dot 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 dot. If you want to blast it with different pulse.
That's the part where I don't know the answer. Is like, what's the secret frequency to get the magic to happen?
3.1415.
The one I'm interested in is 1 divided by 137. But sure, yeah, it could be.
I wonder what the absolute compression state, like the absolute compression of technology, could be if we are making smaller and smaller technologies. We're creating systems that are getting so efficient that we've now got that speeder bike. Have you guys seen the speeder bike, the real world speeder bike? It's a guy and he's riding this little box-looking thing with a seat on it, and he's flying around. And people, I forgot what it's called, but people are like, can that be real? Well, yeah. We already have the jetpacks. The guys put on the backpack and then they have the jets on their hands, and they can fly. You can buy those. I think they're like $200,000, but you got to be trained because your arms have to be strong to lift and hold your weight up. So what happened? Some guy put it into a bike, and it's probably just got jets at different directions. It's air intake and output that will create enough force to lift. Things are getting increasingly smaller and more efficient. I wonder what the absolute state of compression could be for technology. If this technology continually, in every direction, is getting smaller and more efficient, is it possible that at some point we have this tiny little chip that just by wearing it on your body, it's going to project a computer screen, connect to the internet, levitate, create force fields? What is the absolute state of technological compression?
I want to jump it over. I want to hear what Dr. Yu's opinion is. So that when I looked into zero-point energy, it can pretty much do anything. We're talking teleportation, free energy, the power of the sun in the palm of your hand, invisibility, cloaking, potentially ending the aging process as well, because we're talking about potential reverse entropy type situations. So to me, there is no limit. And that's where I think of the danger of it, and not to get political or what have you, but I try to look at the geopolitical lens in terms of like there's ultimate power is capable, and who can we trust with that level of manipulating reality, and how long will our civilization last if two different warring factions have this ultimate power? I think it won't last at all. So that's the other aspect of it, is the danger aspect of it, which is why I think you see the United States and potentially other countries allied with the United States doing things that we would consider to be, evil, so to speak. But there are in their opinion, at least in their viewpoint, necessary evils to protect this technology. What do you think the capabilities are, Dr. Yu?
Oh yeah, I agree with you. If you understand that this kind of we are surrounded with this kind of, I'm not using 0 point, this is called electromagnetic medium, right? To serve exactly the same purpose of that one. There's unlimited energy, because constantly this field being disturbed or being energized, excited by explosions of stars, galaxies, traveling of lights. So of course you have just like sunlight, we can collect solar energy unlimited, right? Just say the same thing happens to the electromagnetic field. That energy will that one.
Okay, go.
Yes, I have another.
Show some experiments.
If we wanted to somehow bring audience to understand the physics, that's my main purpose. I want this gentleman, if you could bring back the double slit experiment. That's the experiment. If you truly understand that concept, you understand 50% of physics better than any textbook teach you. Because this experiment, that's called the central mystery of modern physics. So if you understand this one, today, all the time you spend will be worth it. More than years of physics study, and I'm gonna do experiment. Okay, he's already showing that's part of them.
These are strong magnets.
Yes, that's strong magnets. What I use that one to show where comes the elasticity. That's exactly that. The medium we have electromagnetic medium acting like an elastic solid. You have elasticity. I try to show elasticity created by magnetic attraction and repulsion force. So that's why you can distort the field. You do not need to distort the space-time.
There's a cool video I watched where a dude said he was like, "How many magnets will it take till I can levitate?" And he had a board on the ground, and then he kept attaching magnets to it until eventually he stood on it and it wouldn't compress.
Oh, can you show them the magnet thing? The balls?
You show the magnet ball. Okay.
Or whichever one you want to show. Okay. Yeah, because he's getting it ready right now. So the one thing that we talked about earlier is that, can gravity be explained by electromagnetism? So Dr. Yu has a perfect example here. Yeah.
We're talking about gravity just like a magnetic attraction force. People if they don't believe, Tim just show you. We use static electricity. Can attract this called what is it?
Skateboard.
Yep.
You can take entire Milky Way galaxy. You cannot even do that one.
That's a lot of static.
Right?
Yeah.
You can use this one. So what that means, anything gravity can do, electromagnetic force can do it. So we don't need it. But now, Ashton wanted me to show another counter argument. They always say, hey, gravity is different than electromagnetic force. Because what? Because gravity, the magnitude is 10 to the 36 times power, less than electromagnetic force.
Wow.
So I try to say, hey, if you consider electricity, gravity force is electricity, I'm going to show you why gravity force is getting less and less. I have a square magnetic bars. So thank you for reminding me.
Yeah,
I don't know if
we can see that. Yeah.
You can see that one, huh? Okay, so I say, hey, how many balls I can pick it up? So I do this one.
That's a pretty powerful magnet to be able to pick up all those balls, right?
It's difficult to pick it up, but I think I can pick this two. Okay.
Oh.
So I have 3 balls. Pick 2. So that means that this is a magnetic force. Yep. I tried to demonstrate how gravity is part of magnetic force, how that works. So I'm folding this one. Okay. So you actually know the answer. Okay, I'm going to ask Eden and Tim. So if I fold this one.
Grab the microphone, pull it over.
I'm sorry. Okay, if I'm folding the same magnets, make the center of gravity is lower. If I can do that, but it's too hard. I'm going to folding much smaller, a quarter length. So how many balls I can pick it up?
I would think more because you've created more density, it looks like.
What do you think, Tim?
Tim?
I'm just going to say the same amount of balls.
Same amount of balls.
Okay. Because I'm going to say whatever the opposite of what
Think
Ian
about
said.
it. Think about the 3. So that's the testimony.
Love this.
That's where
Here we go.
Ashton made an explanation to this gentleman.
Kellen, what do you think?
Can you have a guess? Am
many
I?
balls do you think?
And get right
He's
up
the
on that
producer,
mic.
Okay, he's behind the scenes.
Kellen knows.
I'd probably say 3.
Say none,
All of
because
them?
then we got
Oh,
to.
yeah, no balls.
Ian says 3. I say 2, the same amount. And Kellen, I told him the same amount, which makes no sense, but sure.
I hope now you can see.
Oh, he was right.
Nothing.
Kellen was right after all.
So why does this work?
On the bigger one.
Why does this work? Because all we did was we folded the magnets together, and the
now it won't
magnetic
pick up
fields
anymore.
are canceling themselves out now. So what is gravity? So the Earth is just a giant magnet that's generally pretty neutral. The Earth is just a giant.
You were right, Kellen.
So the more dense matter becomes, the more neutralized the magnetism of it, but we still...
I have a question. If we turn the lights off, can we see the static?
Probably not.
Machine can detect it, maybe not from
Because like, were you ever like in your room at night with fresh sheets and you can see the light when
sure, yeah.
the sheets of static electricity? I can feel it when I put my hand on it.
right. You can
Yeah.
sense that one because this is still radio wave. It's not in the visible wave, so maybe not see by human bare eye, but machine, of course, you can feel it.
Yeah, you can feel it.
Yeah.
You want to feel
We
it?
got to get one of those. Yeah, for sure.
Here, pass it over.
So what about
hold the button down and put your
increasing-
hand on it. And
Why
you'll
does
feel the electricity.
increasing the density at a local level reduce the magnetic?
What I try to say, hey, you do not changing mass, right? You do not change mass. The force. Oh my goodness, he got a static shot.
I did. Oh, I love that feeling.
Yes.
I sleep on a bed like this. I'll tell you more about it later.
So that's where if most of the matter, say we say on Earth, most wave fields is neutral, is it because the magnetic particles can neutralize them. So the more neutralize them, even like Earth.
Can I see the balls and the magnet?
Yeah, so the Earth is just
the
a
ball is not a magnet. Okay, he's gonna test it himself.
the Earth then is just a very weak
Kind of
magnet. I mean, it seems
magic
powerful
trick.
because it's so big, but ultimately, if you were really add it up, you would say, oh, well, it's actually pretty weak, and you're going to find out that it's actually gravity is
you can-
now
yeah, you
just
can-
electromagnetism, relatively neutral.
Is that because of the spherical density? If the Earth was a long tube, it sounds like it would be more magnetic.
That's right.
Exactly.
Now I'm gonna show you use magnets. If I make this is called in series, right? You have a more magnetic field. But when you have what happens is you have a more magnetic field. You have a stronger field that you can interact with until one day it's buckled. What you see what happens if it's buckled? You become a neutral particle now.
Yeah.
For every part you have a positive, you have a negative with it. So that's how magnetic force can be neutralized, becomes called what is called neutral particles.
So here's the other question I have is, how many magnets are here, do you know?
Oh my goodness, 62
like
or 40,
30.
maybe 48.
Yeah.
If I remove magnets from it, will it lose magnetic force?
Yeah, magnetic force.
Eventually,
yeah, sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it will eventually just drop the ball if I pull them off the top?
Oh, that's a good question. Actually, if you have just one square, probably you can pull them. You can pull them all.
Oh, okay.
Oh, so the
Even the force is
There it goes. It
reduced.
fell off.
so
It did reduce.
One thing that is reduced, but
So
smaller.
when I disconnected this,
yeah.
okay, no, it stayed
Oh
on.
no.
Oh, there,
Oh, okay.
it fell off. Yeah.
Yep. It's pretty neat. It's intuitive, right? I mean, it really helps you understand it.
sort of like the shape of the magnet dictates the magnetic force.
Exactly. You do not changing mass, you can have a huge force. That's why we said we need a black hole to hold the matter together. They connect the force directly to how many mass. No, you connect this how much force to electromagnetic force. It's not based on mass.
So why are things in the universe drawn towards sphericity, spherical?
That's a very, very good question. Why everything we see in space look like a spherical? Because a spherical give you perfect three-dimensional neutralized system. That's the most stable. Three-dimensional, if you think about it.
Neutral stable. That's perfect.
So you'll see like comets tend to be more magnetic, and then or maybe.
Exactly. Comet has you see.
Oh, maybe is it because they're moving in a straight line, so they're giving the visage of a long straight magnet, whereas if they're revolving in an orbit, then they give the visage.
Very, very smart observation. Basically, you say comet is not as perfect spherical. That's exactly say it's not a perfect neutral. It's highly magnetized, highly charged. Oh my goodness, that's you provide evidence why comet traveling faster than anything else, right? Differently, and have a different geometry instead of a sphere, because it's not a neutral.
Yeah. And not to change the subject too much, but there's one last thing that I wanted to bring up, which is there's a patent
Oh, you
called...
got that one.
Oh, yeah. There's a patent...
Tim has more fun
When,
with experience.
when I add this little piece of metal,
Oh yes.
it drops.
That's interesting. Okay.
So I was able to pick it up. You got to be very careful and go very slow. It still falls, but if I, because it's barely got enough force to lift. Oh, I can't get it to go now.
Well, I'll give you guys one last cool scientific thing, which is coherent matter wave beam. There's a patent for this that is by a Lockheed Martin engineer and his partner, Charles Chase. And there's a video out there recently where they were talking about this patent is a microchip that goes back to 2011, 2013. But just recently, in the last, I think, few months, this guy came out and started talking about what his patent does. And he essentially says that we can take fermions, which is, a point where we can't have, two fermions can't be in the same point at the same time. Wow. And he's saying we can actually cause that to occur. We can create a matter wave beam, a wave of matter, because of general relativity. And what this will allow, and he references the Ehrenhoff-Bohm effect and coherence as well, is that this could allow for lasers that are, or a laser beam that is 1,000,000 times more powerful, or a beam that's 1,000,000 times more powerful than a laser, which would be very useful for gravity manipulation if we wanted to do that. It would also allow atomic scale manufacturing, which is the idea that we could, at the atomic level, produce a microchip one atom at a time, potentially make metamaterials out of it. And then the last part he says, which is kind of coy, is he says, transportation of matter over distance. And I go, wow, that one's pretty weird, because when I think about this teleportation, I think that maybe they are like turning the plane into a wave function and then shooting it out somewhere else.
We are completely overtime. So it's been a lot of fun hanging out with you guys and talking about all this crazy science. But we are over, and we're going to give a shout out to Jeremy Hambley of the Quarterings, and a raid on his way. Where can people find more from you, Dr. Yu?
One place is, have all the past videos, I did with my partner, David Gronowski, the website called aneighborschoice.com. So you can find the information on more videos. I hope I can get a video from you for this interview. Can I post on my...
Yeah, of course.
On that website.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
You say your website is A Neighbor's Choice?
A Neighbor's Choice is a one word. aneighborschoice.com. Ashton have a lot of comments on that.
Yeah.
Where can they find you?
At JustXAshton on all social medias, on YouTube as well. Check out my live streams. I also did Hard Truths podcast. You can check it out. Dr. Yu was one of my guests relatively recently. Amazing podcast. So come check it out, guys, if you want to learn about the science, physics, etc. We need everybody to wake up so that we can get to the future that we all deserve.
Yeah, dude.
Where are you at, Ian?
My dream, man. I'm at Ian Crossland. Follow me on the internet at Ian Crossland. I'm into this.
We are back tonight at 8 p.m. for Timcast IRL. Check it out. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see y'all then.